The following is a midterm assignment for course QXL 3363, Language, Culture and Power at Bangor University. The following presentation aims to analyse if the Breton language can survive the linguistic and cultural oppression of the French government. After the fall of the Roman Empire in around the 5th century AD, the Anglo-Saxon conquerors pushed the Celtic population in Britain to the west of Cornwall, Ireland and Wales, and the more wealthy of them fled to Armorica, renaming it Brittany, or Little Britain, in memory of their lost land. Almost immediately, tension began with the French, and although the Bretons had integrated peacefully with the local people, the now Bretons had been the target of attacks by not only the Franks, but also the Vikings and the English. But although the Bretons were put under heavy pressure, they managed to keep their land and also their language. At the beginning of the 20th century, half the population of Brittany spoke Breton only, and half were bilingual in Breton and French, showing the two languages could happily coexist. However, in 1902, the French government banned the teaching of Breton in public schools, as the language was considered a threat. To this day, Breton is the only Celtic language not recognised as an official language. More recently, however, there have been a number of important dates in terms of the Breton language. In 1951, the Aix-en law authorised the teaching of Breton, which had previously been outlawed, and in 1976 the first preschool for Breton was created, although it only had half a dozen pupils. This was seen as a big step for Breton, as it was argued that many speakers learnt Breton as a second language to French, and so their proficiency and accent was sometimes viewed as unnatural. In 1981, the first degree in Breton was created, although in 1993, successive French governments, both left and right, refused to sign the European Charter of Minority Languages, and so refused to recognise the linguistic rights of Bretons. But, in 1994, Diwan, the Federation of Breton Language Medium Schools in Brittany, enrolled more than 1,500 students from preschool to high school. But again, the French government attempted to quash this development in the language, as students of the scheme's bilingual program of the College of Charles Le Goffin de Lyon saw themselves refuse the right to take history and geography exams in Breton. The media is a problem for Breton. Firstly, most adult speakers of Breton learnt the language very briefly, and although maybe accomplished speakers of Breton, very few can read or write it, so advertising and other forms of written Breton are very seldom used in the media. Breton speakers can view one 45-minute programme in Breton on television every week. However, this is regularly cut short for sporting fixtures and is simply not enough to sustain the Breton-speaking community, especially in comparison with the Welsh, for example, whom have their own channel. In terms of radio, several hours of Breton are available each week, depending on your location in Brittany, as signal is an issue. Although the prospect of expansion is almost non-existent, and radio is ever growing as a dying media, and especially not utilised by the youth, the area of Breton society targeted by the Breton authorities as the area that is key to the rejuvenation of the language. However, the internet could be the saving grace for Breton, as many online resources on the history of Breton and classes in the learning of Breton can be found online, and is arguably the most used medium of media available. In France, Breton has no official stature. According to the revised constitution of the Fifth Republic, French is the language of the Republic. The Breton language will be therefore an anachronism of the old regime. French, as opposed to Breton, which does not exist legally, therefore benefits from the protection of the constitution. So this makes the use of Breton in legal, commercial and any public documents against French law and therefore illegal. The following is an interview with Anique. Anique is a retired French and English teacher living in Brittany. She was born in Brittany and has lived there her entire life. As the interviewer, I chose not to ask her age, as it was a first time meeting with her, but assume her to be from a previous generation, which was a factor in why she was chosen as the interviewee due to her knowledge of the time. I interviewed her in her home in Mel Carre in central Brittany, and she was made aware of the aim of the project, which was to evaluate the prestige of Breton in Brittany.
Absolutely not. It was strictly forbidden. Forbidden, forbidden, forbidden. And we were deprived of our language.
I've
When
read
I was
this
a schoolgirl, you see, some of the other kids would swear or criticize, insult the teacher in Breton, and the poor lady didn't answer a single word, asked me if I, would translate, which I did with a lot of caution, of course. Learned to be really a diplomat since that time, yeah.
Fair enough.
It was it was strictly forbidden, and even it was forbidden at my time. At my parents' time, it was even, it was humiliating for them because they were given punishment. They were to wear the last, during the day to be caught speaking Breton was to wear a wooden shoe round the neck, which was to humiliate them.
Why a wooden shoe?
Because peasants were wearing wooden shoes.
Yeah,
well, there is a problem. There are, specific classes called D1, school D1, they call it.
How would you spell that?
I write it.
Thank you.
School.
Yeah.
And D1 means to grow. You see, when a seed grows, so it is aimed at little, children. And they have, specific schools and classes where they are bilingual from the beginning. Even some kindergartens start, teaching them Breton. But the problem is, and there are programs on the third channel as well, and they can study it at primary level, then at junior school, and then they can follow with the language until they get into university.
Okay.
And then become teachers, of course. All right. But the problem is they've lost the rhythm, the accent, and they have a very, 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 very strong French accent. So when I listen to a program, if there is somebody who learned the language from, childhood on, and is about my age or something like that, I can understand that person quite well. At school, speaking in a very artificial way, as if you were
like
speaking,
a rule-based approach.
As if you were speaking Latin, a dead language, and it's very frustrating. But people among themselves, apart from old retired farmers, do not speak Breton. I tried sometimes, in places like Quimper or even Carré, in shops, for instance. Never have I met people speaking Breton at all. Because we were deprived of it. And we've been deprived of it since, things started as early as the end of the 19th century, when education became compulsory. So, of course, schools were in French. And as I told you before, no room was left to Breton at all. We were denied the use of the language. And then the First World War broke out, and some Bretons were killed on the front just because they didn't understand the orders they were given in French. And so, of course, when they came back, they understood that learning French was a must if they wanted, to leave the manure heap in the middle, of their farm, if you see what I mean. Yeah. They wanted, of course, to grow up the social scale. It's the end of it, actually. Only a handful. I've given, hope. Even though, it is taught at school, it sounds so artificial. Only a handful of people keep it, a handful of intellectuals, a handful of artists, singers, writers.
Similar to Welsh, because it's happened in Wales, but they've tried putting it back in schools and stuff.
Yeah, and when I went to Ireland as well, far more people were speaking the language among themselves, and younger people. But the
Gaelic.
daily, in pubs, in the streets, you see, in the shops as well,
Yeah.
which we do not do here.
According to the Breton Language Office, at the beginning of the 20th century, approximately 2 million people spoke Breton. Today that number has slumped to 250,000, according to UNESCO, which has Breton listed as an endangered language, as it is currently losing around 10,000 speakers a year and has a rapidly aging population. If the language continues this rapid decline and does not attract a large group of younger speakers, it is hard to conceive how the language can be sustained. Also, in comparison to another Celtic language, Welsh, Breton has not created advantages to learning the language. For instance, some jobs in Wales need Welsh speakers, so there is an economic incentive to learn. Also, Welsh speakers at university in Wales are given added grants to take their exams in Welsh. This is not seen in Brittany, and it is generally perceived that French is the language of prestige, not Breton. Finally, the Breton community does not have enough financial backing to facilitate a change, and so, without the help of the French government in supporting minority languages in France, the situation in Brittany will continue to decline.